From heartbreak to brotherly sacrifice, these are 3 of regular show's saddest episodes. The first episode is Take Me Amadeus, the 37th episode of the 4th season. This episode starts off with a montage of Mordecai and Margaret's relationship, showing their chemistry evolve over time. After this, Mordecai is trying to figure out a way to ask Margaret to be his girlfriend, but Rigby interrupts him, and they start to talk about Mordecai's date. He tells Rigby that he's taking Margaret to Take Me Amadeus, a very fancy and expensive restaurant. So to cover the cost, Mordecai shows Rigby a stack of Amadeus dollars that he's been collecting and trading for with the other workers. And he also tells Rigby that he is planning on asking Margaret to be his girlfriend on the same day. And to show his respect, Rigby throws in a few of his own Amadeus dollars. On his way to pick up Margaret, Mordecai gets a phone call from her, who tells him that something came up and if she could meet him at the restaurant instead. He agrees and he makes his way over. Once there, Mordecai confirms his reservation and asks for an extra fancy table. But when he shows the worker the Amadeus dollars, she tenses up and presses a hidden button. And a few moments later, we see the FBI barge in and tackle Mordecai, even taking him and his friends into an interrogation room, where they are questioned by 2 agents about the counterfeit Amadeus dollars, but they don't know what they're talking about. And Agent Costello tells the crew that they have evidence stacked against them, and if they can't prove their innocence, then they'll be arrested, which understandably angers the park crew, all except for Pops, who breaks down and begins to cry. He tells everyone that he bought the dollars from a mysterious man for half the original price, and reveals a card that he gave him as well. But there's only a phone number on the card, so Kessler orders their arrest. But Mordecai tells the agents that he needs to go on his date, even showing them a couple of pictures of him and Margaret, and he begs them to give him the chance to catch the real counterfeiter. So they agree. Kessler tells them that if they can catch the perp, then they're off the hook. So Pop calls a number on the phone while Mordecai and Rigby wire up and suit up. Now in the dining area, Costello tells Mordecai that Margaret has arrived, but he has to leave her when the suspect arrives, and Kessler reminds him of their deal. During their small talk, Margaret tells Mordecai that she has something to tell him, but is interrupted by Costello, who tells him that the guy is here. So Mordecai pretends he has to go to the bathroom and sneaks off. He meets up with Rigby and they sit with the suspect, who pulls out a briefcase and asks him to show the money first. So Mordecai calls the waiter and gives him the secret phrase, and is handed a brown pouch. So the suspect gives him the briefcase holding 10,000 Amadeus dollars. But in order to seal the deal, they have to get the suspect to admit the money is fake. And after a bit of back and forth, Mordecai gets a little too loud and catches Margaret's attention. He tells her to wait at their table, but the hidden guy tells her to sit with them, and raises his voice when she refuses. He even flips the table and pulls out an SMG, revealing himself to be the leader of the Capicola gang. And he begins to tell them that he survived the explosion and had to lay low for a while, until he got the idea to sell them cheap Amadeus dollars to lure them out. And just as he's about to fire at them, the agents and crew rush in, warning him to drop his weapon. But the rest of the Capicola gang show up and threaten them as well. Now in a standoff, everyone waits patiently for one another until a chef walks in and drops a plate, starting a huge shootout between the 2 sides. Luckily, no one gets hurt and Mordecai and Margaret are able to crawl to a safer spot. Once secured, Mordecai begins to tell Margaret how much he means to her and ask her to be his girlfriend. And Margaret tells him that for the first time in her life, she feels like she could be in a relationship that could actually go somewhere. But then reveals a letter from her dream school, revealing she got accepted, and although she really likes him, she might not get the opportunity again. So she breaks down and tells him that she can't be his girlfriend. And Margaret gets up and runs away, both her and Mordecai devastated by the situation. So everyone stops firing and the leader of the gang speaks up, saying school is overrated, and shortly after he is blown up, along with his other friends, defeated by Amadeus himself, who won't tolerate any disrespect towards education. Now at home, Rigby is seen approaching Mordecai on the roof, asking if he drove Margaret to the airport, to which he says yes. And after asking if he wants to talk about it, Mordecai says no, and the 2 friends drink a cup of sodas and watch the sunset, ending the episode. Yeah, in this episode, we finally see Mordecai's relationship with Margaret progress perfectly, feeling like for once everything is great, but he is harshly reminded of the difficulties of life and the uncertainty of one's future, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. The next episode is Skip's story, the 22nd episode of the 5th season of the show. In this episode, Skip shares a story on how he attained his immortality. The story begins in an old high school, where we see Headmaster Bennett talking to Walks about his fighting habit, and warning him that if he gets into one fight, then he'll be expelled. But he doesn't take him seriously. After this, Headmaster Bennett shouts for Gareth and tells him to show Walks where his locker is. On their way to his locker, Gareth informs Walks about the social groups of the school, from the jocks to the athletes to the drama club, to eventually introducing him to his friends, who invite him to join the student government. But shortly after, he gets shoved into the locker by a bully named Clorkbane, who intimidates the others as well. and after begging him to leave them alone, Walks steps in to defend them, and the two immediately begin to get in each other's faces, Cloakbane even pushing Walks 2 times before he pushes him back, and just as they're about to fight, Headmaster Bennett interrupts the two and they play it off. Now lunchtime, Walks tries to look for a spot to eat and is offered a seat by a girl named Desdemona. They introduce each other and talk for a bit until Garrett and his baby friends try to convince Walks to fight Cloakbane, and he tells them that he was already planning to fight him. So to assure his victory over Cloakbane, they show him a pair of gauntlets, but Walks says no, as he feels he doesn't need them. But Garrett and the others warn Walks of Cloakbane's ability, telling him that he was created immortal and cannot be defeated by an unarmed mortal. So he takes a closer look and tells them that he'll think about their offer. Finished with their conversation, Walks realizes Mona isn't there and spots her leaving, so he runs after her. He asks Mona what's wrong, and she tells him that she thought they had a special connection, but she doesn't like guys who fight. So he tries to change her mind about him, and he tells her that they should get to know each other first. And Mona gives him another chance and asks Walks to help her make decorations on the prom committee. He obviously agrees and they get to work right away. And while Mona shows Walks how to properly use a hammer, they get interrupted by Cloakbane, who wants to finish their fight. And as Walks gets ready too, he remembers what he told Mona, so he refuses to fight and walks away, while Cloakbane insults him. And this does bother Walks, so he quickly asks Mona to go out with him and she says yes. So he tells her that he'll pick her up at 7. After this, Cloakbane is seen bullying the other students because Walks didn't put him in his place. And Walks sees this, so he talks to the student government, who told him to fight Cloakbane and that Mona and Bennett would understand. So Walks agrees, and the student government promises to set up a time to fight that doesn't conflict with his time with Mona. So while Walks spends time with Mona, spinning and skipping around the school, the student government continues to work on the Fist of Justice until completion. Now in the hall, Walks gives Mona a necklace and helps her put it on, also inviting her to the prom. When class time rolls around, Garrett passes Walks a piece of paper, telling him the fight is scheduled for 8 PM, the same time as prom. And this obviously upsets Walks, but Garrett tells him that he can still go to prom and all he has to do is sneak out and meet them behind the auditorium, where they'll hand him the Fist of Justice. So Walks agrees, and after a few hours go by, Walks goes to Mona's house to pick her up for prom. Once there, Mona and Walks talk for a bit before he notices the babies outside the window. So he decides to give Mona some punch, while he pretends to have drunk his and needs to use the bathroom. But Mona doesn't fall for it and invites him to dance. While they're dancing, Cloakbane is growing impatient, so Garrett decides to give Walks a reminder by repeatedly hitting the window and screaming his name. But Walks is dragged by Mona to have their picture taken, which angers Cloakbane, who decides that he'll go to Walks instead. While they're getting their picture taken, Mona asks Walks about his strange behavior, but he says it's nothing, and shortly after, Cloakbane breaks through the wall, destroying all types of decorations while yelling at Walks for ditching their fight. Mona, now confused by this, Walks tries to apologize to her, but Cloakbane throws her out of the way, which angers Walks. But Cloakbane doesn't stop there, as he's also seen shoving Headmaster Bennett onto the ground. Bennett also asks for help and Mona gives Walks the nod, so he steps up. But as an unarmed mortal, he's no match for Cloakbane, so Gary tries to give him the Fist of Justice while the babies help as well. But Cloakbane reveals a weapon of his own, which he uses to attack Walks and one-shot his friends. Cloakbane continues to attack Walks, forcing his back against the wall, and just as he's about to unleash his final attack, Mona jumps in the way, causing the attack to stray, destroying a piece of the ceiling and crushing Mona in front of Walks. And at the same time, Garrett is able to launch the Fist of Justice to Walks, allowing him to finally fight back, eventually taking down Cloakbane and expressing his immense hatred towards him, and he winds up his final punch and sends him into space. After this, Walks quickly rushes over to Mona, but discovers that the only thing that survived was the necklace he gave her, so he just stands there crying. A few years later, the babies tell Walks that Cloakbane's orbit will return him to Earth in 157 years, and ask him if he's willing to become immortal to fight him again, and he agrees. But before they make him immortal, they warn him that he'll outlive everyone he loves. But he says he already lost the one he loved, so they ask him for a name to be reborn onto, and he begins to remember the times he spent skipping with Mona, so he picks the name Skips, and they make him immortal. And he ends his story by saying he'll skip until the end of eternity, as it's his way of being close to Mona, which makes Mordecai and Rigby tear up. And while they grab more shingles, Skip takes out the necklace he gave her and begins to cry, ending the episode. Yeah, it's always amazing to see such a comedic cartoon create an episode as amazing as this one. The viewers are always aware of Skip's bravery and daringness, almost never seeing a vulnerable side to him, but this episode shows exactly that. His most meaningful relationship being broken by many factors out of his control makes this episode even more emotional, reminding us that he still carries a lot of untouched emotions. The third and final episode is the last episode of the series, titled A Regular Epic Final Battle, The Power. This episode begins in Mordecai and Rigby's room, where they are seen fighting with a toy wrestler in a very similar way they did in the first episode. But when Mordecai throws Rigby onto the trampoline, Rigby starts to feel deja vu, and when he hits the wall and gets up, he tells Mordecai that they have done this before. And Rigby suddenly remembers all of the things that happened in the future, and he tells Mordecai that this has happened before, but he obviously doesn't believe him and thinks they're going to get fired. But Rigby reassures him that they'll never get fired and says he can prove it. So Rigby digs up the Blu-ray box set that contains everything that'll happen in the next 6 years, but Mordecai still doesn't believe him, as Blu-ray wasn't even around at the time. But as soon as he touches the box, he instantly remembers everything inside it, and shortly after, they begin to realize that something isn't right, and they need to help Pops. So they use the power from that time to reach the end, where we see Pops fighting Anti-Pops until Mordecai and Rigby appear, telling him that they'll always be there for him. But Anti-Pops blasts them with an energy attack, which destroys the power and launches them into the ground, where he follows up with another attack, destroying the planet and launching Pops into a black hole, where he sees an earlier rendition of him, so he decides to fly out of there and back into action, where he sees Mordecai and Rigby fighting for their lives, and he's forced to evade the letters of the show's title to reach them. And just as he reaches his hand out, he's attacked by a sticky note, which attacks everyone else as well. And Anti-Pops reveals that the fabric of reality is unraveling, and he prepares to finish off Mordecai and Rigby, and Pops is forced to watch until he remembers everything he's learned so far, and reaches a moment of zen, allowing him to teleport to his friends and save them just in time. Now in a safe spot, Pops tells the two that he should have been following his heart this entire time, and blasts off to confront his brother, revealing himself in front of him and causing him to charge up his true final attack. But instead of preparing an attack of his own, Pops extends his arm and hugs his brother, pushing him and nullifying his powers with internal feelings. And once he's the size of Pops, Pops continues to hold him, slowly approaching the sun and showing Anti-Pops his determination to share their end. And Pops shares one last final message to Mordecai and Rigby, telling them to take care of each other and saying his final goodbye, approaching the sun and touching the heart of his evil brother, who hugs them in their final moments before they explode, and letting everyone return back to Earth, where we see the crew step out, crowded by cheers and the love of their families and friends, each sharing a moment with a special someone, except for Mr. Maylord, who realizes he lost his son. So to remember the man who is Pops, there is a statue to honor him, and everyone moves out, trying to find their own path in life. Mordecai begins to paint again, Rigby and Eileen start a family, Benson and Pam get together, Mitch and Starla have more kids, Skips continues to work, and High Five Ghost and Celia DJ around the world. We also see Mordecai meet a new woman named Steph, and a final montage of everyone and their kids play out, eventually placing a statue of Mr. Maylord after he passed. The group also takes a photo, and Mordecai and Rigby are seen showing their gratitude towards Pops and reliving one last moment of their friendship, while Pops reveals he has been watching their story the entire time, ending the episode. Yeah, this episode was extremely sad, not only because it was the last episode of the series, but also because it showed the complex side of emotions and relationships, creating a great build-up to the ultimate sacrifice from one of the nicest people in the world, and seeing everyone grow up and continue on this path called life is very bittersweet. Well guys, it looks like that'll be it for today. Please leave any comments or thoughts you may have about today's video. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you would like to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later. Also, don't forget to check out my other videos as well.